I'm on the deck of the Titanic when I started hearing something. Oh my God, look at this ship.
It's how your life.
Okay, it's gonna be the time of my life. Ah!
To the best crew on the Atlantic. We are in open water.
White Star Lines, we'd like to welcome you aboard this maiden voyage of Titanic.
So you thought you could just steal these from their final resting place?
I preserve them so their memories can live on.
What is she doing?
I call on you, you spirits, rise!
How long has this been happening?
Hallowed water, and you have desecrated it.
The events of the movie take us back to 1912, when the Titanic sank tragically. A girl named Elizabeth gets away from the ship that is sinking and calls her fiancé in a panic, Charles, but he doesn't answer. The ship's captain pulls her into a lifeboat, which is dropped into the water. Nevertheless, the cables holding the lifeboat snap, and it capsizes, flinging everyone into the sea. Elizabeth manages to get atop the overturned lifeboat, screaming for Charles once again. To her surprise, he responds from a nearby iceberg. Determined to save her, the young man goes into the water. Elizabeth glances desperately into the black waters, but suddenly a reanimated corpse emerges from the depths and takes her down into the abyss. 110 years after the sinking of the original Titanic, the Titanic 3 embarks on a new voyage along the same path. Like its precursor, a journalist says that the ship will stop at the scene of the terrible disaster that claimed almost 1,500 lives. A guy and a woman arriving at the dock in a car enthusiastically stare out the window. The man is in wonder at the ship and advises his companion to put down her phone and stare at it, moaning that the individuals who built the ship are benefiting from a catastrophe. The woman finally glances up, noting the stranger is filming. He begins to obsess over Titanic 3 the moment they step out of the car, and they are instantly swarmed by fans excited to snap photos. After posing for a few images, they record a joyful video for their followers before boarding the ship. Meanwhile, the captain of the Titanic 3 introduces his team, featuring Brian Andrews, a former Navy SEAL who has formed a special team to provide further safety. He will answer to both the captain and Hector, the head of security. Although there is already security on board, additional personnel will help, especially with the vast number of passengers and the relics from the original Titanic, giving everyone a good day at work. The woman dismisses the crew to their places on the bridge, and the captain gives instructions to start the engines and set sail. Meanwhile, on deck, the passengers are celebrating the successful departure. Once the ship is at sea, a young woman appears from one of the luggage trunks. She silently walks through the ship's lower levels, locating a room to unpack her things. On deck, the blogger couple records another video for their followers and then decides to greet other passengers. After departing the cargo, the young woman carefully navigates the ship's passageways. In one of the chambers, she discovers a crew uniform and takes it. Julie McKenna over the loudspeaker presents herself as the crew's organizer. She announces that the ship has been meticulously recreated over 10 years by master craftsmen, with generous sponsors providing actual items from the site of the original Titanic wreck. Tomorrow evening, Captain Rose will guide everyone to the Titanic's final resting location, where they will observe a moment of silence in honor of those who witnessed the awful event. Now, she wishes everyone an enjoyable stay. An unknown girl concealed in the crew uniform sneaks into a museum room, approaching a cupboard with a violin. She delicately takes it in her hands, ensuring no one is nearby. Just then, a man enters the room. He shouts at her, demanding she put the violin down. Instantly, it is the most expensive object in his collection, the violin that played Nearer My God to Thee when the Titanic sank. The violin had lain at the bottom of the ocean for 100 years, and he doesn't want some low-level staff member destroying it. Julie, who is nearby, tries to calm the man down. Meanwhile, the girl notices a hair clip in an adjacent cabinet. She remarks that her great-grandmother had one just like it. She is outraged because the man has taken objects from the site of the Titanic's final resting place, reminding him that ancient Egyptians were buried with their treasures and that those who touched them were cursed with death. The man, disturbed by the odd girl, asks Julie who she is. Julie, unsure, just asks the girl to leave. While the man and Julie are distracted, the girl softly takes the hairpin with a penny and leaves. The bloggers continue recording numerous films for their channel. Whilst filming, the man man accidentally bumps into someone, apologizing for his clumsiness. He receives a scathing remark in response and is told to avoid looking at his phone. The woman comes in and tells the man that it was he who raced into them. The man quickly turns to compliment her, which deeply displeases her companion, and they proceed to examine the ship. The mysterious girl returns to the lower decks. Meanwhile, the bloggers continue to wander the corridors and accidentally bump into Brian. Mia and Jackson tell him they're a bit lost, and he gives them directions. A lecturer is conversing with a traveler, flashing him a wedding ring. It formerly belonged to Captain Edward Smith. The dude quickly exhibits interest in acquiring it and asks how much it costs. The lecturer disappoints him, indicating the ring is not for sale but offers a few other items the man might wish to purchase. After shaking hands, the two men go to look at the treasures in the lower deck. The girl begins performing a ritual. She grabs a photo of Captain Edward Smith from her suitcase and calls on the spirits of death. Meanwhile, a magnificent gala concert begins in the ballroom. Captain Rose is in her cabin getting dressed while video chatting with her fiancé. Mia and Jackson, still investigating the ship, enter one of the chambers. They are in awe of the surroundings when they note the girl practicing the ritual. Unable to understand what she is doing, they prepare to depart as she cuts her hand. Deciding it's better to get away, the door behind them suddenly crashes open with a loud noise. Startled, they turn around to see their fan, Nancy, who had been viewing their live broadcast and decided to join them. The girl, entirely ignorant of the audience, resumes her ritual abruptly. The walls of the ship begin to wobble, and the blogger camera cuts out. Witnessing all this, Jackson suggests they get as far away as conceivable from this odd woman. Mia and Nancy follow him. Captain Rose is ready for the event in her cabin, conversing with her fiancé. Suddenly, the lights begin to flicker, and when she returns to the chat, she realizes that the connection has been lost. Meanwhile, Mia, Nancy, and Jackson are strolling down a corridor on the ship. Nancy shares that she's been following them for years and planned the cruise immediately after knowing they would be aboard. The bloggers are impressed by her dedication, and she suggests they come to her cabin to charge their phones. Just when the professor runs into Jackson, he accuses him of being careless. He looks at Mia and laughs. Nancy, assuming the professor is also a fan, proudly reveals that they have 12 million followers. Upon hearing this, the professor's expression shifts and he instantly begs Nancy to leave. Mia, responding promptly, orders the girl to stay and informs the professor that he needs to be more courteous. The professor absolutely ignores her and explains that he has a collection of Titanic relics, offering them for a fair price, especially a blue diamond that would suit her. Horrified by his behavior, Mia walks away and tells him not to touch her. Jackson then intervenes and compels the professor to leave before the concert begins. Julie collects everyone's attention and announces that they have approached the site of the catastrophe and will hold a moment of silence in honor of those who perished that day. At the same time, the girl resumes her ritual. Once the moment of quiet ends, Julie thanks everyone and announces the commencement of the Gaia concert. Immediately as she does, the girl finishes her ritual and Captain Edward Smith, her great-grandfather, comes before her. Meanwhile, Mia and Jackson decide to go out on the deck and film a video. Suddenly, Mia hears music and a ghost with a violin appears behind them. Enchanted by the tune, she invites her husband to dance. As they dance, something odd happens on the ship. The power on the entire Titanic 3 goes out for a brief moment. While Mia continues dancing with her spouse, the full crew starts hearing a terrible sound. Mia grips her head and begs for it to halt. Jackson is perplexed and doesn't know how to help. The ghost with the violin is currently right next to Mia. She anxiously pleads for the sound to stop but doesn't notice that the ghost is tugging Jackson into the fog. Once the horrible sound ceases, the captain's assistant orders a ship-wide diagnostic. After regaining her calm, Mia glances around, hoping to find her husband. Instead, the professor approaches her. He tries to calm her down and recommends they go to the bar. She agrees but remembers her phone and returns for it, promising the professor she'll join him shortly. He leaves, and Mia pulls up her phone, deciding to produce a video to convey what just happened. Immediately, the eerie violinist appears before her once again. It emits a dreadful scream, killing her instantly. The captain's assistant, having evaluated the equipment data, reports that the fog is too dense and the radar is picking it up as an object. Distracted by another instrument, he doesn't notice the odd flicker on the screen. Deciding to contact Rose, he fails to reach her, telling his colleague to keep an eye on the radar. He heads to the lounge to check on the woman. At this moment, one of the passengers, along with a lecturer, is examining a lifeboat from the wreckage site. She can't believe that people were once rescued on it. Hoping to distract her, the professor exhibits an ancient necklace on the deck. Two security guards discover Mia. After checking her, they realize she's dead. Meanwhile, Parker arrives in the ballroom to see Captain Rose. She's astonished by his visit. but he tells her that she's needed up top. When they reach the bridge, she notices weird behavior with the instruments. She suggests trying to reboot the system. Then Brian bursts in, visibly worried, and requests the captain to come with him. Together they proceed to the deck, where Mia's corpse lies. Upon seeing the dead woman, Rose asks where her spouse is and instructs Brian to check whether she was live broadcasting on social media. It might help figure out what happened. A few minutes later, Hector arrives at the site. He tells the guards to sweep the area and check all the cameras. The captain picks up the blogger's phone and asks the head of security to check who the last person she phoned was. Then, she heads to the bridge to report the event to the Coast Guard. Meanwhile, one of the engineers is dealing with a malfunction. Suddenly, abruptly, strange noises capture his attention. When he turns around, he sees people approaching him. Afraid, he attempts to run, but it's no use. A ghost comes in front of him with a thought, rips a valve off a pipe, and sends it flying, decapitating him. The engineer Hector, Brian, and several guards are monitoring the cameras. Rose joins them, and they tell her that they didn't discover anything untoward, but they managed to hack into her phone. Handing it to her, they play the last video Mia recorded. The video doesn't show what occurred to Jackson. It's as if he vanished into thin air. Then they see Professor Cochran approach Mia and invite her to the bar. He departs, and Mia pulls up her phone. Her face suggests that she saw something scary, and right after that, she died. The captain speculates that Cochran has returned, and it's time to interview him. At that moment, Professor Cochran is chatting with Julie in the ballroom. Rose and Brian approach him and tell him they need to speak with him in a separate room. Unsure of their wishes, he follows them and learns that Mia Stone is dead and her husband has vanished. He was the last person to see her alive, and they have surveillance footage showing him arguing with Jackson. He confesses that he can be short-tempered sometimes, but nothing more. Brian advises taking him to the brig to resume the questioning, and the captain agrees. The unknown girl in the hold uses her abilities again, and immediately, the ship's engine starts running. Rose, who was about to observe Professor Cochran's interrogation, feels the ship starting to move. She orders the man to manage Cochran on his own and hurries to the bridge. As soon as the door closes behind her, Brian angrily asks Cochran when he'll learn to keep his mouth shut. Surely he'll get him out of this mess, but now it'll be for 15%, not 10%. Cochran argues, stating he's not willing to give up that much only for the guard bringing him clientele. The maximum he'll give is 11%. After debating back and forth, they settle on 13.3%, but Brian will now have to locate clientele with deeper pockets. Brian doesn't get why Cochran can't ever earn enough money selling his junk, but Cochran disagrees. These objects have history tied to them, and while they mean nothing to him, they mean everything to the buyers. As for the dead, they no longer care about them because they're dead. After leaving his partner in the room, the guard walks out. As Rose walks along the terrace, she realizes the ship is moving. She tries to radio Parker, but there's no response. When she reaches the bridge, she asks what's happening and why the ship is moving. The assistant answers that something is clogging their system, and they don't know what's going on. They've already reset the system, but it didn't help. Something else caused the engines to engage, and now the ship is going on a new course. Furious, Rose commands them to engage reverse and fix the dilemma while she heads to the deck. On the deck, Brian meets her, and they head down to the engine room together. Just as they leave, Julie and Mrs. Strauss step out onto the deck. Mrs. Strauss compliments the necklace around Julie's neck when another woman walks by. They wait until Strauss is alone, and the ghost attacks her, strangling her with the necklace. In the engine room, Rose prepares to try to shut the throttle valve. Abruptly, she notices the engineer's body. Scared, she tries to reach Parker, but the radio is malfunctioning again. Recognizing they must shut the ship down quickly, she begins to troubleshoot the systems, but nothing works. The computer is frozen, and they can't move the valve. Brian observes that the engines can't sustain the pressure and argues they need to leave. Although Rose is reluctant to leave quite yet, she has to neutralize the throttle valve first. Seeing that the system is about to burst, Brian grabs the captain and runs out of the engine room. As the door swings shut behind them, a powerful explosion occurs in the ballroom. Passengers tumble to the floor from the strong jolt. After recovering from their immediate shock, they start inquiring what happened. Recovering her composure, Rose says they need to alert the others immediately. There's a bit of panic on the bridge, and the crew is confused about what's happening. Someone suggests that it might have been an iceberg. However, Rose denies it, as the instruments show that one of the engines has failed. Parker tries to call the captain, but she doesn't answer. Just a few minutes after, Rose walks into the bridge. Regina informs her that there's an iceberg ahead on their current course. The assistant says that at the moment, they are drifting with the current, and even if they collide, the impact won't be strong enough to harm the ship. Brian starts to panic slightly, but the captain orders Parker to attempt reaching other ships. Meanwhile, Hector inspects the engine room, being watched by the ghost. On the bridge, Parker is still attempting to establish communication with someone. Seeing that nothing is working, Rose addresses the passengers, informing them that one of the ship's engines has failed. She encourages them not to panic and to remain in their cabins. When the engineers work on the problem, suddenly the Coast Guard establishes contact. The captain mentions the situation and demands a response. Shortly after hanging up, she tells her crew that the nearest ship is 2 hours away. Delivering instructions to everyone, Rose heads to her cabin to contact the corporation. Meanwhile, Cochran is stuck in his room. Abruptly, he notices water leaking from the ceiling. The lights flicker and go out. Suddenly, he starts hearing terrible sounds. In a panic, he screams for it to stop. When the rumbling ceases, he sees the ghost standing before him. Afraid, he jumps into the other corner of the room, imploring the apparition to leave, but the phantom locks his hands to the bedposts and exhales its icy breath on him. On the bridge, Nancy bursts in to talk to the captain. She insists she has something crucial to express. Rose decides to listen, and Nancy says that the ghost killed Mia. To prove it, she displays the last video from the blogger's phone. However, Rose doesn't believe her and reassures her that there are no ghosts on the Titanic 3. She then asks Brian to bring Nancy back to her cabin and decides not to release Cochran just yet. He won't go anywhere, and when they arrive, she requests that the authorities question him. After the news, travelers head to their cabin. Brian rushes to fetch Cochran. When he enters the room, he finds the man twisted and laying on the floor in a dazed state. In a confused state, Cochran appeals for him to stay away. As soon as they help him to his feet, he demands to be escorted to the captain. Leading Cochran to Rose, he explains that he observed something unusual. He doesn't know what it was, but it felt like death itself was close by. Furious over being cooped up alone, the man threatens her with attorneys and asks that they turn the ship around and return to New York. At that moment, one of the guards enters and says he couldn't locate Hector anywhere. The commander asks Brian to escort the professor back to his cabin and then goes with Sykes to the engine room to search for Hector. The men leave, and Rose attempts to reach the head of security over the radio. The guards lead Cochran to his hut, and along the route, they encounter an odd girl. The professor quickly recognizes her as the one who had been loitering around his collection. He accuses her of all that's occurred, yet the girl denies killing the couple but says she knows what's happening. She believes they aren't ready to hear the truth. Brian insists on a solution and advises testing her. The girl then points to Cochran and claims it's all his fault. When he dug up graves and stole the dead's belongings, things started afresh. At first, she believed things had settled down and the voices in her head had begun to fade. Ever since her great-grandfather perished on the ship, she only had rare dreams. But now, since Cochran disturbed the graves and began selling their possessions, the voices have returned, and this ship is cursed. Cochran, panicked, asks how to stop it, but the girl says it's too late. It's his curse now to watch everyone around him die. The guard brings Cochran back to his cabin, but unexpectedly they spot a ghost ahead. The man immediately hides behind a corner as the constable tries to converse with the apparition. However, he fails to communicate, and the ghost kills him. Cochran cautiously peeks around the corner but sees that the guard is gone, replaced by the ghost. In a panic, he runs off in the opposite direction. Meanwhile, Brian walks the girl to a room. She says it won't help and that they're all going to die. Nonetheless, a minute later, the doors close on their own, and Edward Smith appears in the room. Brian shoots at him, but the bullet hits his partner instead. At that point, the power on the ship cuts out completely, turning on the flashlights. Rose spots the ghost crying in fear. She orders everyone to beam their flashlights at the wall, but when they do, the space is empty. Believing she must have dreamed it, she orders everyone to return to mending the system. Edward Smith transmits some of his authority to his great-granddaughter, and Brian, who watches in fear, can do nothing. After the ghost is finished, the girl turns to the guard and knocks him unconscious. She then quietly leaves the room. Cochran, in a panic, runs back to his cottage and resolves to get rid of his complete collection. Attempting to calm down, he rushes to the toilet to wash his face and sees Mia's ghost. Brian comes to his senses, confirming that his partner is alive, and steps out of the room to search for help. However, the second man decides he should not wait for backup, and as soon as he steps into the corridor, he encounters a ghost that kills him. Meanwhile, the girl reaches the bridge. Using her powers, she throws Parker aside. Rose also tries to stop her, but as soon as she hits the girl, she sees the ghost of Edward Smith. After this, the girl pushes the captain away and takes control of the spacecraft, confidently driving Titanic 3 toward the iceberg. The woman begs her to quit, reminding her that she is no longer the captain and that the killing of all the passengers won't bring him back to life. However, he doesn't react, and the other crew members fail to regain control of the ship. Rose then makes a last desperate effort to reach the great-granddaughter, telling her that if the ship crashes, she will perish with the rest. Happy, The girl says that she understands and slices her throat. Moments later, the spacecraft crashes into the enormous iceberg. Julie attempts to soothe the passengers and guide them to the assembling area. Rose anxiously attempts to contact anyone, but no one answers. Her attempts are interrupted by Cochrane, who enters and claims he understands what's going on. To end all of this, the artifacts need to be returned to the depths, but the woman refuses to listen, telling him that if he wants to help, he should go help the passengers and aid them with boarding the lifeboats. Titanic 3 sinks swiftly, and fear develops on board. At this moment, Brian steals a chunk collected from the hull. However, he doesn't get far before Mia's ghost appears in front of him. Using her powers, she compels the guard to shoot himself in the head. The ship is already more than halfway buried in water, and Rose tries to coordinate the evacuation, assigning part of the process to Cochrane. She heads to another portion of the ship. The water is already flooding, and fear and panic are increasing in the ballroom. Julia discovers Brian, but he has already turned into a ghost and drops a lifeboat upon her. The professor pulls himself together and starts helping people. The lifeboats are ready to be lowered, but the ropes holding them are severed by the ghost's powers, and people tumble into the river. Rose stays on Titanic 3 until the very end. The ship completely sinks. A trembling Cochrane lays in the lifeboat when he hears a voice. It's the surviving captain. The woman asks for aid, and he drags her in, entering the boat and laying on the bottom. The man laughs, considering it a sad irony that the others died while he survived. Rose attempts to soothe him, claiming that let folks flee, so he has to let it go and deal with God. Subsequently, after listening to her, the lecturer delivers a few sentences and falls quiet. Turning to him, the captain notices that he is dead. A few moments later, he also turns into a ghost and kills Rose. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, leave a comment about your favorite movie, and we will make it next. Thanks for watching.